centralized or portfolio model? Today on the Daily Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Show, a show not just for rental housing providers, but anybody who's looking for a little bit more white space on your calendar. Welcome to the show. It's good to see you. So today we're going to be talking about, it helps if I click the right buttons, a portfolio, centralized or portfolio model. I will tell you, I know there's a lot of folks who watch this show who watch it because they use the VIP method in different aspects of their business. This show today specifically is going to be for folks who are property managers, or they are also property managers for their own portfolio. So basically, they own a property management company, and yet they are the owners of the property management company, but they are also the customer of the property management company. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, and this is actually going to be another show that's going to be coming up here. I often get into this conversation around folks who say, well, they own their rental properties, right? And maybe they own their properties through an LLC. Maybe they own their properties in a land trust, which the land trust is the trust. They have a trustee, and the LLC is the beneficiary of the trust, or whatever. There's lots of different ways that you can set that up. But I like having a property management company that manages the properties, and then the LLCs or the trusts, which, through the LLCs, then are the customers of the property management company. Lots of property management companies they're broke. They don't have any assets. They really don't have a lot of assets, just because they're going to be the ones that are going to have the leases that are extended to the residents, not the company that actually owns the assets. So again, I'm not an attorney. Definitely talk to somebody who is, knows the laws in your state in terms of that. But that's just generally a very common setup that I see. So let's talk about this in terms of the property management setup. So when what we're talking about here today is we're obviously talking about what's the common conversation that I have with folks is, should I do a more centralized model or should I do a portfolio model? Well, let's just start from the basics. Every property management company is going to start out with a centralized model, unless they're starting out with hundreds and hundreds of units right out of the gate. A centralized model always makes more sense. Why am I cut off here today? Oh, I know why. Because I'm on a little bit of a stand here. Okay. Saying, why is the top of my head cut off? But a centralized model, it always going to start, especially for people who are just starting to get into the business, they're going to start in a centralized model. Now, if you're looking at starting in a centralized model, what does that mean? Well, generally, it's going to be something like this, where you're going to have one office. There's going to be, you're going to have one software system. Now, the software system, the one office, it could be a physical office. There's lots of virtual offices these days, but it's generally going to be one location. Now, again, that has kind of gone by the wayside with COVID and all of that. So that really kind of redrew the map in terms of lots of property management companies having a physical location. So really having a physical location anymore really isn't even all that necessary, with the exception of how are you going to handle keys. And that's really what I've seen with a lot of property management companies who have gone virtual. We are kind of a hybrid between virtual and physical location. We do have a physical location still, but really, we're even rethinking that if it makes sense to have, to go entirely virtual, where we don't necessarily have to have a physical location anymore. So there's, again, one office that could be, in the cloud. That could be one location, one physical location. But there's also one software system. Now, the software system, that could be one property management software system. Again, we're talking about property management software. We're talking about accounting software, right? So there's generally you have a software system, it could be several pieces of software that are tied together. Like, for example, when we were with Property Boss is a property management system which integrates with QuickBooks. Propertyware, which used to, and I don't know if they've made the decision to cut that off or not. They used to integrate with QuickBooks. I don't think they do anymore. Appfolio, I think that they still will integrate with QuickBooks, although I don't know that it's entirely necessary. So, some integrate with QuickBooks, some don't. For those who are in the smaller realm where, Property Boss or PropertyWare or Appfolio may not be an expense that you can cover just yet, maybe it makes sense to go with a cheaper solution, which a less robust solution, which might be like Rent Ready or Tenant Cloud, or even the folks over at Rent-A-Ware. Rent-A-Ware right now, I know that they are getting ready to do a soft launch. They're kind of doing a relaunch and are in beta right now. So I think for right now, I think you can get their whole package for like $9 a month. And I think while they're in beta, they're actually keeping they'll obligate themselves to that pricing for anybody who comes in and helps them develop the software. They've got some bugs they want to work out, but they want to bring that to their clients and have them help them work that out. So the folks over at Rent-A-Ware, I know they're working on that. And I think, let's be honest, $9 a month is really hard to beat when you're getting tenant screening and also rent collection and stuff like that. So you've got one property manager. So going back to the centralized model, there's typically one property manager. That means all roads, all information flows through that one property manager. Now that could be a general manager, it could be a property manager, but basically they are the one that's handling all of the communications between the vendors and the owners and that sort of thing. Now, in this particular case, when you have, if it's just you as the owner, that one property manager will be pretty much the linchpin to that entire operation. Okay. And then of course you have support staff. You may have a bookkeeper, you may have a leasing agent, you may have a maintenance person. And those are generally the people that you're going to have in that centralized model. And that will typically grow based on the number of clients that come in. Okay, so let's see. I have hey, Kathleen Paul, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining me from Las Vegas. I hope you guys are getting that water situation figured out down there. I'm kind of worried about you guys. I know water is becoming a major problem down there in Las Vegas. So anyway, the centralized model, this is a very typical model that you'll see with in centralized. Now, let's look at the portfolio model. You may have one or more offices. Now, again, because things are virtual, I mean, let's face it, everybody's, living room or kitchen table can become a virtual office. So that is a little bit not as well defined, but you could have satellite leasing offices with one main office. That's pretty typical. You'll still have the same software system, which might be, again, you have one property management system, one accounting system. That's pretty similar. But the difference is you're going to have multiple property managers and multiple support staff. So how that typically works is in the where you would have normally one property manager that would manage all of those properties. Let's say that they have 300 properties in a particular market. All of the properties are under that purview of that one property manager. In this particular case, what you would have is probably a general manager, right? The general manager, or maybe even an operations manager, where you have the general manager or operations manager that would oversee multiple property managers that may be carved out by geography, right? Or that may be carved out by avatar or by different types of properties, for example. So let's look at how that could work. So let's pretend you've got your general manager up at the top or your operations manager up at the top, and then you've got multiple property managers. Say this property manager handles the south side, this property manager handles the east side, this property manager handles the north side. Or you may have it carved out differently between, let's say, different avatar, whereas this property manager may have it, where they handle all the single family dwellings. This property manager handles all of their maybe commercial properties, and then maybe this property manager over here handles all of their one-bedroom flats downtown, right? So that way it could be carved out by avatar, or it can be carved out by the individual property. So either way, you have multiple property managers that will then have their own support staff. So obviously you could have that person, each one of those property managers has a different leasing agent. Each one of those property managers has their own maintenance staff. They may have their own maintenance managers, right? So that each one of those individuals reports to that property manager, and each of those property managers reports to that operations or general manager. So that's a very typical portfolio model. if they're looking at that. Now, the question always comes up, and I get this a lot. I get people who reach out to me from time to time and want me to do some actual consulting work for them. A lot of my coaching, as if you're following the show very often, it follows a lot of mindset, but I get every now and again, people will want me to actually do some consulting for them. So they're saying, hey, we're at 500 doors. We like what you're about. We really want you to help me grow to 1,000 doors. I do that from occasion, from time to time, but I don't take on too many clients for those. Typically, they're property managers. But the typical question I get in that is, how many units can one property manager handle? Well, it depends. And I know I don't want to sound I mean, I'm not trying to be elusive here. It depends on a lot of factors. First of all, it's going to depend on the avatar. Now, what do I mean by avatar? It can be like that type of clientele. There's certain types of clientele which are just going to take up more bandwidth than other types of avatar. Like a large commercial client may take up more bandwidth than someone who's got residential properties. Now, if we're talking about residential, again, it's still going to depend. I can tell you that when I was working with a lot of lower end type properties, C type properties, it took up a lot more bandwidth than my higher end properties. Again, you can come to your own conclusion as to why, but all I can tell you is that there's just a lot more handholding on when I was dealing with C type properties. So in terms of that, then I would have to have it was very avatar dependent. And it also reflects on the types of property. So if you have a type of property, again, we talked about whether it's a single family dwelling, maybe it's a multifamily, where everything is all in one location versus, properties that are spread out all over the city. It could also be, again, if you've got a commercial clients or industrial clients or whatever that is, that's also very typical in terms of the types of property. And it's also going to depend on your infrastructure and process. That's a big deal. If everything is running through a cell phone, that's a pretty lean infrastructure, right? And if you've got one person that's running around just trying to keep all the balls in the air, then you've got very low processes. You don't have a lot of processes that are well defined. Well, honestly, that's a major component of that as well. So again, if you don't have infrastructure, if you don't have a well-defined infrastructure, let's face it, you're going to have to beef that up with process. Okay, let's talk about that here for just a quick second, then we're going to wrap up. When you don't have the infrastructure built out, in other words, if you don't have the software systems or anything else like that, and you're doing it all analog, right? You're doing it all by hand, then you're going to have to beef that up with process. Okay. So if you don't have the infrastructure, you're going to have to beef that up with process. And most times when people beef that up with process, what they do is they hire it out. Okay. The problem with that, when you're hiring people into an inefficient organization, it actually magnifies the inefficiencies. So let me say that again. If you bring someone into an inefficient organization, when you're hiring people into an inefficient organization, it actually magnifies the inefficiencies. However, when you bring people into an efficient organization, it actually magnifies the efficiencies. So that is again, in terms of the infrastructure and process, you have to make sure that is well defined before you start bringing people in. There's a lot more videos on landlordcoach.com if you'd like to check that out. Feel free to visit over there. And if you want to reach out to me, there's a contact me section in there. You can reach out, and I'd love to hear from you guys. Let me hear what kind of things that you're going through with your, are you a centralized model or your portfolio model? What do you see? What are the weaknesses? What are the pluses and minuses of each? And that's probably, that might make a good video on the back end of that someday. So anyway, we'll do that another time. All right, everybody. Well, please be sure to place a value on your free time, because if you don't, someone else will. And most important, there is no amount of money that will make time irrelevant. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you next time.